That's already too much of the hat. Nightmare Alley, the 1947 original, is a movie that was considered in its time to be, well, based on a book that was considered in its time to be intelligent trash, that's from Wikipedia, and disrespectful of religion, which is from something that I'm going to go ahead and say right off the bat. A better review from a professional critic than anything you're going to find online. Imogen, I want to say? Sarah Smith. And a special feature is her review of the movie. And if you were to watch this as a breakdown of understanding what you're watching and why it's important, I think it says everything that I could possibly say about this, except one thing. There's a crazy unboxing here I'm about to show you. So, this was released on the tail end of the noir era, which, since this is the first one I'm putting out to actually celebrate Noirvember, I'll go ahead and explain. You typically think of, a detective in a raincoat, and police officers and gangsters and crime and dread, and this movie has almost none of that. As Miss Sarah Smith pointed out, there's not even, I don't think, guns in this movie. She speaks to how this movie is all about, it sort of speaks to how this genre is about the mind, the mental state of its characters and the horrors that come from that. That's one way that this genre, this ill-defined genre, is so special. And Nightmare Alley hammers this home in a way that is different from a lot of others. A lot of other people, you have the fall from the femme fatale type of, archetype, the, secret plots, people pulling threads and doing things, and you have that staple in this movie. Hands down, the most unique thing about this story that struck me even harder in the movie I'm going to talk about after this, as a follow-up review, is the way the plot is revealed is by having it not be told to you. Yeah, that sounded intelligent. I'll have to explain what I mean more later. This is sort of what I wanted to do. This is the sort of thing that got me excited to do reviews in this way. So, Nightmare Alley, the original, is based on the book that was adapted to Guillermo del Toro. Now, a lot of people say this. Spike Lee, I'm looking at you, old boy. This, I think, genuinely was remade because there are elements in the original that were repressed because it was made during production code times where you can't do certain things on screen, even though they broke some rules anyways. For example, if you know the ending of 2021's Nightmare Alley, this has a possibly happy ending. I'm not going to explain to you how that happens, but when you see it, you're probably going to go, oh, there is a very clear button, staple, point, line delivered in the movie that tells you when the story is over, that almost telegraphs when you're good to stop watching. This was very close. Surprisingly close to the story that was in the 2021 version. I mean, obviously, tighter pacing. You have the black and white of it all, which I was tempted to do for this video, but I wanted to show off where I got my lights to go. I know I'm doing the whole blown out lighting thing, leave me alone. Religious aspects of things are defended, and that's amped up. There's a particular small thread of, she's played by Rooney Mara in the modern remake, but that character, her relationship to Tyrone Power's lead, she calls him out for sort of playing this evangelist, playing God in this way in people's lives, and it sort of tries to invoke a, I think, half-hearted message of, well, the consequences of playing God is that, this happens to you. The general consensus of what I can get from the behind the scenes and all that is that this story is the simple degradation of a man from seeing someone in the worst point to becoming the person in that worst point. It's a movie that, like a lot of noir, which are based on these pulpy, paperback, cheap printed crime stories that are considered lowbrow, has gradually crept into being a very important sort of reflection on a person's ability to fall. It was directed by a name named Edmund Goulding. Did a spectacular job, but most of the movie's budget came from Tyrone Power, the lead actor, being someone who was a star at the time and wanted to play against type. Now, there was a quote pulled from him. It really seemed like Tyrone Power, who went out of his way to get the rights to the book so that he can have this movie be made, pushed for this movie to retain its story instead of having like a happy ending or having all of its controversial elements stripped away, at the risk of his star power, and then the movie flopped and whatnot. And so when he invokes this idea that the story must be told, but it also must be popular in order for that story to have an impact on a wider audience, I believe that that's some of the reason, not all of the reason, for some of, there's something going on there. His star power brought the budget to the movie. So they were able to basically build a whole carnival and have the set pieces and things like that. Then to have him drive to this simpler setting where the story picks up and plays out the way that it does. And again, the story unfolds. The characters that are central to what is ultimately going to happen aren't even in the roles they're going to be in or at play until like 30 minutes into the movie. You're not even introduced to one of the main characters until well into the movie. And I thought that was interesting about both versions of this. But again, all of this comes back to an elaborate, star-studded, fantastical, but grounded production of something that very carefully rides a line between entertainment and dread and pessimism and importance until you end up in this room with someone where you realize that there is a simple betrayal happening. And I want to set this up because it's not going to be as simple later. In time, in history. I'm saying it's going to happen in the remake. I had a feeling that maybe this was released because of the new one, and it is number like 1078 in the collection. So I feel like it was released partially because of the new one. So I wasn't 100% sure how I was going to feel about this, but I loved the story, and this is that story with a small spark of originality because they're having to adapt it, and it hasn't been on film before. Now, that's not to say anything about the remake. I'll talk about that in just a minute. So, or in just a day or so for you.